Most of us go through life almost on autopilot. We wake up, go to work, check our emails, scroll on our phones, come home and repeat. It feels like life is passing by, right? And sometimes, even when everything seems perfect, good job, good family, enough money, we still feel a kind of emptiness, a restlessness inside. Eckhart Tolle noticed this, and that's where his book starts. Why do we feel unhappy even when we have everything we want? Let's break it down. Tolle says the main reason is that we're living through our ego. The ego is that little voice in your head that constantly says things like, I am not enough, or I need more to be happy. It's always comparing, judging, and wanting. Tolle points out that this ego-driven thinking is unconscious. We don't even realize it most of the time. It's like wearing glasses that slightly distort everything we see. You don't notice the distortion until you take off the glasses. That's what awakening is about, removing those glasses. Now let's talk about what awakening really means. Awakening isn't about doing more, or achieving more, or even becoming someone special. It's about becoming aware of who you really are beyond your thoughts and ego. Think of it like standing on a riverbank and watching the water flow by. The water represents your thoughts, your emotions, and your ego. Awakening is simply noticing the water without getting swept away by it. You're still in the river, but you're not carried blindly. You're observing. Tolle also talks about a bigger picture. Humanity is ready for a shift in consciousness. He calls it the flowering of human consciousness. In simple terms, he means that if enough individuals awaken, it can change the collective mindset of society. Now let's address a question that often comes up. Is awakening about giving up life's pleasures? Not at all. Tolle is clear that awakening doesn't mean renouncing the world or living like a monk on a mountain. It means experiencing life fully without being controlled by ego. You can enjoy good food, music, friendship, or career success, but you don't depend on them for your inner happiness. It's like eating your favorite chocolate. You enjoy it, but if it's not there, you're okay. The joy comes from presence, not from the object itself. Tolle emphasizes that suffering is optional, not mandatory. Most suffering comes from resistance to the present moment. You've probably noticed this yourself. Maybe you're stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, and your mind is full of complaints. Why is this happening? This is unfair. That's resistance. But if you accept the moment, even reluctantly, you stop fueling the negative cycle. You might not enjoy the traffic, but you stop adding extra suffering. Here's a simple exercise you can try, even for a minute. Sit quietly and close your eyes. Notice your breath coming in and going out. Observe the thoughts that arise, but don't engage with them. Just say, there's a thought, and return to your breath. Doing this regularly strengthens your ability to notice the ego without being trapped by it. You start realizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. Another point Tolle makes is about presence in everyday life. You don't need to meditate for hours to awaken. You can practice presence while walking, washing dishes, or talking with someone. For example, if you're having coffee with a friend, notice the aroma, the warmth of the cup, and the sound of their voice. Fully immerse in the moment. That small shift transforms ordinary activities into opportunities for awakening. Tolle also warns about spiritual ego, the subtle trap where people think they are awake and look down on others. Real awakening is humble. It doesn't need validation or recognition. Think of it like sunlight. Sunlight doesn't announce itself, it just illuminates. Similarly, consciousness grows quietly within you. Finally, Tolle introduces the idea of a new Earth. This isn't about science fiction or a different planet. It's about transforming life here and now through individual awakening. Let's dive into something Eckhart Tolle calls the flowering of human consciousness. It sounds a bit grand, but don't worry. It's actually simple and very practical. Think of it as how our minds, hearts, and awareness can grow, like a flower blooming, to a new level of understanding ourselves and life. Tolle begins this chapter by pointing out that humanity is at a crossroads. On one hand, we've developed amazing technology, science, and material comforts. On the other hand, our inner lives haven't kept pace. Many people still feel stress, dissatisfaction, and fear despite external progress. Now, what exactly does flowering of consciousness mean? Tolle explains it as the awakening of human awareness beyond ego. It's not about thinking more or learning more facts. It's about realizing that we are aware beings, not merely our thoughts or roles. Imagine a person standing in a dark room. They have been bumping into furniture, tripping over things, and feeling frustrated. Suddenly, someone turns on a light. The room hasn't changed, but now they see clearly. That light is like consciousness. It illuminates reality, including your mind and ego. Tolle emphasizes that this flowering is already happening, but unevenly. Some people are more aware than others. He calls these individuals early awakeners. They have glimpsed life beyond ego and notice things others miss. The beauty in simple moments, the stillness in silence, the interconnectedness of life. For instance, consider Maya, who practices mindfulness daily. She notices her breath, her sensations, and her reactions. Over time, she responds to challenges calmly, rather than reacting impulsively. That's an example of flowering consciousness in action. Now let's connect this to everyday life. Have you ever noticed that when you are fully present, even small moments feel meaningful? A cup of tea, a conversation with a friend, or the sound of birds in the morning can bring a sense of peace. This is a glimpse of flowering consciousness. It's not about escaping life, it's about experiencing life more fully. Tolle also introduces the idea of awareness of thought patterns. Most of us live in the past or the future. We replay memories, worry about what might happen, and plan endlessly. This constant mental activity keeps us disconnected from the present. Flowering consciousness happens when we notice these patterns and realize we are not our thoughts. For example, Priya often worries about a presentation at work. She replays potential mistakes in her mind. By noticing these thoughts without judgment, simply observing them, she reduces stress and performs better. This is a direct application of the principles Tolle shares. Another important point Tolle makes is about ego as a barrier to consciousness. The ego thrives on identification, your job, your possessions, your achievements. The more you define yourself through these, the less aware you are of your true self. Think about Ravi, who identifies strongly as a successful manager. When things don't go his way, he feels devastated because his ego feels threatened. Flowering consciousness helps you step back and see that your worth isn't tied to outcomes or labels. Tolle uses simple, everyday language to explain how awakening feels. It's like a shift in perception. You notice life with clarity, without judgment, and without clinging to outcomes. He also introduces the idea of collective awakening. Individual transformation can influence groups, communities, and even nations. Think of a workplace. When one person stops reacting from ego and starts responding with awareness, it changes the dynamic. Colleagues notice the calm, the patience, and the clarity, and some of them begin to adopt similar behaviors. Over time, this creates a ripple effect. The flowering of consciousness spreads subtly but powerfully. Tolle stresses that awakening doesn't mean perfection. We will still have thoughts, emotions, and egoic reactions. The difference is awareness. Awareness allows us to choose how we respond, rather than being hijacked by old patterns. For example, you might feel anger when someone criticizes you, but awareness lets you pause, take a breath, and respond calmly. You still feel the emotion, but it doesn't control you. He also highlights the difference between doing and being. Society emphasizes doing, achieving, producing, and acquiring. But being is the quality of presence. Being is like sunlight, silent, steady, and illuminating. You can do your work, but if you do it from a state of presence rather than stress or ego, life becomes lighter, more joyful, and more meaningful. Tolle also talks about collective challenges, war, environmental issues, political conflicts. These are often fueled by unconscious ego patterns. Flowering consciousness, even at an individual level, helps reduce these patterns. If more people act from awareness rather than ego, society can gradually transform. It's time to dive into something central to Tolle's teachings: the ego. Understanding the ego is crucial because it's the part of us that keeps us trapped in repetitive patterns, unhappiness, and unconscious living. So what is the ego? In simple terms, the ego is your self-image, the you think you are. It's made up of thoughts, memories, roles, labels, and beliefs. For example, you might think, I am a teacher, I am successful, or I am creative. These identifications feel real, but according to Tolle, they are not your true self. They are constructs of the mind. Tolle explains that the ego thrives on identification with external things: status, possessions, roles, and even beliefs. The more you cling to these, the more you feed the ego, and the less aware you become of your true self. Think of ego as a mask you wear. It may look real, and you may even forget you're wearing it. But underneath it, your true self is always there, still, silent, and aware. Tolle also emphasizes how ego creates a sense of separation. It always says, I am separate from others, from the world, from life. That's why ego is often accompanied by judgment, criticism, and comparison. For example, when you look at a colleague and think, I am better than them, or I am worse than them, that's ego creating a false sense of identity. It thrives on us versus them thinking. A powerful way to recognize ego is by noticing the reactions it triggers. Ego reacts strongly to criticism, insult, or loss. Imagine a small argument with a friend. Instead of calmly listening and responding, your mind immediately defends, attacks, or resents. That's the ego feeling threatened. The moment you notice, this is my ego reacting, you gain a little distance and freedom. Let's talk about common ego-driven patterns. Comparison. Always measuring yourself against others. For example, noticing your neighbor's new car and feeling envy. Judgment. Criticizing yourself or others to maintain a sense of superiority or control. For example, thinking, she's not smart enough for this job, or I never do anything right. Defensiveness, reacting when the ego feels attacked. For instance, snapping at a colleague because of a minor comment. Blame, pointing fingers instead of taking responsibility. For example, it's their fault I am unhappy, rather than noticing your own reactions. These patterns are so subtle that we often don't notice the ego at work. But when we do, we begin to realize that much of our suffering comes from being controlled by ego, not by life itself. Tolle also talks about the ego's relationship with time. Ego lives in the past or the future. It clings to memories, regrets, or achievements, and worries endlessly about what might happen. Here's an example of ego in daily life. Imagine getting into traffic and thinking, "Why is this happening to me? I am always late." That frustration is ego reacting to the situation. Now notice if you pause and say, "This is my ego reacting," and instead focus on your breath or the music in the car. Suddenly the traffic is the same, but your suffering decreases. Presence dissolves ego's control. Tolle also explains how ego defines itself through problems. Some people unconsciously feed their ego by identifying as a victim, always complaining or creating drama. For example, someone might say, "Life is unfair to me," and constantly retell the story. The ego enjoys being right and having a story to reinforce identity. Recognizing this allows you to step out of the cycle. Another key point: ego is often hidden in spirituality. Many people believe that being spiritual automatically makes them awake. But the ego can disguise itself in subtle ways, like spiritual pride. For instance, thinking, "I meditate more than others, so I am more enlightened," is still ego. True awakening is humble, quiet, and free from comparison. Tolle also mentions how ego impacts relationships. Most conflicts happen because two egos collide. Partners argue, families fight, and friends misunderstand each other because each person is defending their ego. Let's talk about a simple practice to notice ego. Tolle suggests, observe your reactions to situations. Ask yourself, is this thought coming from ego? Notice judgmental or comparative thoughts. For example, "They are better than me," or "I am worse than them." Pause before reacting to negative emotions. Take a deep breath and bring your attention to the present moment. By doing this, you start creating a gap between stimulus and response. That gap is freedom. You are no longer automatically controlled by ego. Tolle emphasizes that ego is not bad. It has a purpose. It helps us survive, achieve, and function in society. But problems arise when we identify completely with it. Think of ego as a tool. A hammer is useful for building, but dangerous if you swing it blindly. Awareness is using the hammer consciously. Finally, Tolle invites us to see our true identity beyond ego. You are not your job, your status, or your thoughts. You are the observer, the awareness, the presence behind it all. Even if the mind is busy, that awareness is always present. It's calm, still, and unchanging. Recognizing this is the beginning of freedom. Now that we've explored the ego and how it shapes our identity, we're moving into a deeper layer of human experience that Tolle calls the pain body. This concept might sound unusual at first, but it's incredibly practical once you understand it. Essentially, the pain body is accumulated emotional pain, the energy of past hurts, resentments, and negative experiences that lives inside us and influences our reactions. Tolle explains that the pain body is semi-autonomous. It has its own energy and can take over your mind and emotions when triggered. For example, consider a simple situation. You receive a mild criticism at work. Normally, you might shrug it off. But if your pain body is active, That small comment can trigger a flood of anger, shame, or sadness. Suddenly, you are no longer responding consciously. You are reacting from accumulated emotional pain. The first step in dealing with the pain body is recognition. You have to notice when it's active. Tolle suggests paying attention to sudden emotional surges, anger, anxiety, sadness, or fear. Ask yourself, is this my pain body speaking? Simply naming it helps create distance. Awareness weakens its power. Tolle also describes the ego-pain-body connection. Ego and pain body often reinforce each other. Ego thrives on stories, and the pain body provides powerful stories of suffering. Together, they can create cycles of unconscious behavior. Imagine someone arguing with a colleague. The ego wants to win, the pain body amplifies anger or resentment, and suddenly the argument escalates. Tolle also points out that the pain body is often dormant, but it can be triggered by external events or even by other people's energy. For instance, if you're around someone who is angry or negative, it can awaken your pain body. That's why certain relationships feel draining or why some situations seem disproportionately upsetting. Understanding this helps you take responsibility for your own emotions rather than blaming others. Tolle emphasizes that resistance fuels the pain body. Trying to suppress emotions, deny them, or fight them only strengthens their energy. Instead, accepting the emotion as it arises, without judgment or identification, allows it to move through you. Think of it like a wave. If you resist, it crashes violently. If you allow it, it passes naturally. Tolle also introduces the concept of collective pain body. Just like individuals, groups, communities, or nations carry collective pain energy from past events, wars, injustices, or trauma. This collective pain body can influence societal behavior, politics, and even cultural trends. While this may seem overwhelming, individual awareness contributes to weakening the collective pain body. Every conscious action, every moment of presence, helps reduce the energy of collective suffering. Let's talk about practical ways to dissolve the pain body. Observe. Notice when old emotional patterns arise. Don't fight them. Simply be aware. 1. Say silently, "This is my pain body speaking." Naming it reduces its power. 2. Allow the emotion to be felt fully in the body without resisting it. 3. Avoid reliving the story in your mind. Observation alone is enough. 4. The more you stay present, the less room the pain body has to take over. Tolle also notes that awakening involves integrating the pain body rather than eliminating it completely. The goal is not to become emotionless. Emotions are natural and necessary. The key is not being identified with them. When the pain body arises, awareness allows you to feel it without reacting unconsciously. Here's a simple analogy. Imagine a storm at sea. The storm is the pain body. If you are in a small boat without awareness, you get tossed around violently. But if you observe the storm from a safe shore, you understand its patterns and it no longer controls you. You can navigate life without being swept away. Tolle emphasizes that even a small awareness can weaken the pain body. It doesn't require perfection or long meditation sessions. Simply noticing emotional surges and stepping back creates space. Over time, the energy of the pain body diminishes, and life feels lighter, freer, and more present. At its core, the ego is a false sense of self. It is built on thoughts, roles, labels, and possessions. But beyond that, the ego has a desperate need to be right, important, and separate. This core drives much of human behavior, often without us realizing it. Tolle points out that ego thrives on identification with having and doing. Our sense of worth often comes from accomplishments, status, or possessions. Think of someone who says, "I am a manager," or "I own a big house." If these external things are removed or challenged, the ego feels threatened. This is why losing a job, failing a project, or facing criticism can cause intense emotional reactions. It's not just disappointment, it's the ego defending itself. A practical example. Imagine Yulia is proud of her successful career. One day a colleague gets promoted before her. Immediately she feels jealousy and resentment. That reaction isn't about fairness, it's her ego reacting. Recognizing this allows her to pause, observe the emotion, and not act impulsively. Tolle explains that the ego feeds on thought. It creates stories about ourselves, about others, and about life. These stories maintain a sense of identity. For example, someone might tell themselves, "I am unlucky," or "people always take advantage of me." These narratives seem true, but they are constructs of the ego. Awareness is realizing, this is just a story. I am not the story. The ego also resists change and clings to control. It wants stability and predictability because anything unknown threatens its sense of self. Imagine someone who always insists on doing things their way. When plans change unexpectedly, they feel frustrated or anxious. That resistance is ego defending its identity. Tolle emphasizes that ego is subtle. It doesn't always appear as arrogance or aggression. It can show up as subtle self-importance, defensiveness, or even victimhood. For instance, someone might feel hurt because they think others don't appreciate them. On the surface, it seems natural, but beneath it, the ego is seeking recognition and validation. Tolle also explains that ego has a pattern of self-reinforcement. It craves attention, validation, and control. The more you feed it with identification, through thoughts, emotions, or external accomplishments, the stronger it becomes. The less you feed it, the weaker it grows. That's why presence and awareness are so powerful. They starve the ego of its energy. Here's a simple exercise to observe the core of ego. Notice moments when you feel strong emotional reactions, anger, jealousy, pride, or defensiveness. Ask yourself, is this ego speaking? Observe the thought or emotion without judgment. Recognize it as a temporary pattern, not the true self. Over time, this practice helps you step back from ego-driven reactions. You'll notice that much of the anxiety, stress, and conflict in life comes from ego's need to protect itself. Awareness creates a space where conscious choice replaces automatic reaction. Tolle also highlights that true freedom comes from disidentifying with ego. This doesn't mean you stop functioning in the world. You still work, achieve, and care for relationships. But your sense of self is no longer tied to outcomes, roles, or possessions. Imagine someone performing at work with skill and dedication, but without clinging to praise or fearing criticism. That's living beyond ego, fully engaged yet free. Finally, Tolle emphasizes humility and presence. Ego thrives on comparison and self-importance. Presence dissolves the need for egoic validation. Small moments of awareness, like noticing your breath, being fully attentive in a conversation, or observing thoughts without judgment, slowly weaken ego's grip. Think of the present moment as a doorway. All life happens here: breathing, walking, talking, noticing, feeling. Yet most of us live mentally elsewhere, replaying the past or worrying about the future. Tolle explains that the mind resists the now. Ego wants to control life, plan ahead, and hold on to memories. But the present moment is effortless. It's always here, whether we notice it or not. Awareness of the now is like switching on a light. Suddenly, life feels vivid, simple, and peaceful. Tolle also teaches that suffering comes from resistance. When we resist what is happening now, traffic jams, arguments, delays, we create unnecessary stress. Imagine Rachel is stuck in traffic and complains, "Why is this happening to me?" That resistance amplifies frustration. Instead, noticing the situation without judgment, "This is traffic, and I am here," reduces suffering. Tolle suggests practical ways to stay present. 1. Even a few conscious breaths anchor you in the now. 2. Notice sights, sounds, textures, smells. 3. See them as passing clouds, not facts. 4. Before replying or reacting, take a moment to notice presence. Even small moments of presence accumulate. Over time, life feels lighter, more vibrant, and less controlled by ego or pain body. Tolle points out that ego thrives in relationships because it can feed on attention, control, and validation. Tolle emphasizes awareness as the solution. When we notice our egoic reactions, we create space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can choose a conscious response. For example, if someone interrupts you instead of snapping, you might pause, breathe, and respond calmly. Awareness dissolves ego's power in relationships. Practical ways to handle ego in relationships. 1. Notice anger, jealousy, or frustration. Ask, "Is this ego speaking?" 2. Don't react immediately. Take a breath and center yourself. 3. Recognize that your interpretation may be influenced by past experiences. 4. Listen fully and be attentive without judgment. Here's a simple example. Imagine a parent and child having a disagreement. The child refuses to do homework. Ego might react with anger, punishment, or guilt. Awareness allows the parent to pause, understand the child's perspective, and respond calmly. The relationship remains intact, and conflict is minimized. Tolle explains that an enlightened relationship is not about fixing the other person, it's about transforming how you relate. A key idea is presence over reaction. When you are fully present, you listen, observe, and respond consciously. Your partner, friend, or colleague feels genuinely seen and heard. For example, Mira's teenage son comes home upset. Instead of dismissing his feelings or reacting impatiently, she pauses, listens, and acknowledges him. Her presence calms the situation, making the interaction supportive rather than conflictual. Tolle also points out that love and ego cannot coexist fully. When ego dominates, relationships become about control, manipulation, or seeking validation. Enlightened relationships are rooted in acceptance and awareness. You appreciate the other person as they are, without needing them to conform to your expectations. Practical tips for cultivating enlightened relationships. 1. Listen fully without thinking about your response. 2. Notice jealousy, anger, or need for control. 3. Pause before reacting. Choose understanding over reaction. 4. Focus on the person's being, not just their behavior. Tolle emphasizes that enlightened relationships don't eliminate challenges, but they change how challenges are experienced. Conflicts become opportunities for growth and understanding rather than suffering. Tolle explores a profound idea. True peace and fulfillment lie beyond the duality of happiness and unhappiness. Most people spend their lives chasing pleasure or avoiding pain, thinking happiness is something external. Tolle challenges this notion, showing that lasting peace comes from inner presence, not circumstances. Tolle also highlights that acceptance is key. Accepting life as it is, without constant resistance, reduces suffering. Resistance creates tension and amplifies unhappiness. For instance, if Raj loses his phone, ego wants to blame, panic, or resent. Acceptance, acknowledging the situation calmly, prevents unnecessary suffering. It doesn't mean inaction, it means responding wisely without emotional overreaction. Another important insight: joy can exist even amid pain. When you stop identifying with pain or loss, you realize that deep within, there's a constant presence untouched by life's fluctuations. For example, someone grieving a loss might still experience moments of connection, gratitude, or beauty. The presence behind the emotion remains intact. Practical ways to move beyond happiness and unhappiness. 1. Notice when happiness or unhappiness arises without clinging or resisting. 2. Focus on your breath, senses, or surroundings to anchor yourself in now. 3. Acknowledge reality without labeling it as good or bad. 4. Remember that joy, sadness, or anger are temporary. Your true self is the observer. Tolle introduces a powerful concept: surrender. Many people misunderstand surrender as giving up or being passive. But Tolle explains that true surrender is about accepting the present moment fully, without resistance. It's a conscious choice to stop struggling against life as it is. Think of surrender like floating on water. You're not controlling the waves, but you're not being tossed around either. You move with life instead of fighting it. Another important point: resistance to the present fuels pain. Most emotional suffering comes from saying, "This shouldn't be happening," or "I don't want this." That inner struggle intensifies frustration, anger, or anxiety. Surrender dissolves that struggle. You still take action, but your mind and emotions are not consumed by resistance. Practical ways to practice surrender. 1. Observe thoughts like, "I don't want this," or "This shouldn't happen." 2. Internally acknowledge this is what is happening. 3. Accept anger, fear, or frustration without suppressing them. 4. Respond from awareness rather than reactive habit. According to Tolle, awakening is realizing your true self beyond ego and thought. It's the shift from unconscious living to conscious presence, a state of peace, clarity, and freedom. Tolle emphasizes that awakening is gradual, not an instant event. It often starts with small moments of awareness, pausing before reacting, noticing breath, or simply observing thoughts. These moments expand over time until consciousness becomes the dominant state. Remember, awakening is not a distant goal. It starts now, in this moment. Each pause, each breath, each conscious action is a step toward freedom. Life feels lighter, deeper, and more meaningful when you live awake. If you found this summary helpful, like this video, share it with someone who could benefit, and subscribe to the channel for more practical wisdom and book summaries. Let's keep growing together in awareness and presence.